Let's start by telling us how Brittany Griner is doing.
Well, she's at San Antonio at the Brooke Army Medical Center getting appropriate both mental health care as well as physical health care, just to make sure that she's ready for her reintegration back into American society. And they'll work that out with the doctors and the family as to how much longer she'll need to be there. But our initial reports are she's in very good spirits and in good health.
Can you unequivocally say that there was never an option between Paul Whelan or Brittany Griner?
Yes, ma'am, I can. There was never a choice posed by the Russians, well, hey, you give us Boot back, and then you can decide whether you want Brittany or Paul. That was never the arrangement. It was only Miss Griner for Mr. Boot. They treat Paul differently, Shannon, because of these sham espionage charges. He is put in a special category by the Russians, and try as we might, and believe me, Shannon, we did. Right up until the very end, we were making efforts to try to get both of them out. There was just no way to get there. So it was either make this deal now and at least get one of them home and keep up the efforts to get Paul home, and that's where we are right now.
We have to be very clear. We can celebrate Brittany being home. This isn't one or the other. This isn't, we don't want her home. We're happy she is. The reality, though, you have to look at, obviously, Paul Whelan, who has been detained for a number of years right now, about 4 years. And then you look at the fact that there's a guy named Mark Fogel, who was another American who was arrested a little over a year and a half ago for a small amount of marijuana possession, who was given 14 years in prison. So I think the reason I'm critical of what this deal is, again, we love that Brittany's home, okay? So let's put that aside. But why is it that Mark Fogel wasn't included? And also when, people say, look, it was the best deal we could get. It was the only thing the Russians were going to offer. If you make it clear that you're willing to take a deal no matter what, you're going to get a bad deal. And I think you have to negotiate from a position of strength.
I want to talk to you about this report by John Bolton, the former colleague of yours in the Trump administration, who says that there was talk of a Boot for Whelan trade under the Trump administration. You were CIA director, you were Secretary of State. Certainly you would have to know about those discussions. Is that true? And why wasn't the deal made?
I don't want to talk about the private conversations that we had. Ambassador Bolton's free to say whatever he might like, but we were very focused on getting Paul Whelan, not every American, back home.
Is John Bolton telling the truth?
I don't want to comment on our internal discussions. We were working hard on each of the cases, including Paul Whelan's case during my time in service. We were talking with the Russians at multiple levels. Our ambassador on the ground there in Russia, John Sullivan, was working with them. There were lots of discussions about what the right mechanism forward was, but the Trump administration was always very clear. We weren't going to trade bad guys for celebrities because it creates the wrong incentives for the bad guys.
Do you recall a potential prisoner swap with Russia?
Yes, I do recall that. That was raised many times by the Russians, that they wanted Victor Boot. And at the time, there was also the drug smuggler, Yaroshenko, who was ultimately swapped for Trevor Reed, the other former Marine.
Why was that swap turned down then, but it happened just this past week?
Well, look, at the particular time, I also have to say here that President Trump wasn't especially interested in engaging in that swap for also Paul Whelan. He was not particularly interested in Paul's case in the way that one would have thought he would be. Ambassador Bolton met with Elizabeth Whelan, Paul's sister. I was at that meeting as well. There was a lot of attention being paid to this and trying to find ways of arranging Paul's release by all different parts of the US government. But of course, there was a big debate about Victor Boot himself. I mean, as we see now as well, the absurdity of the Russians asking for the release of a notorious arms dealer, as well as somebody who'd been convicted of large-scale narcotics smuggling, in return for American citizens who had been either set up, in the case of Paul Whelan, and later imprisoned in the case of Trevor Reed and Brittany Griner for very minor infractions.